What's up everyone? Welcome back to Drawn Outdoors TV. We haven't posted a lot of videos. Well, actually we haven't hardly posted a video in a long time. We don't post a lot of videos that aren't actual hunts, especially ones when there's no kills or anything. We don't really want to waste your time with stuff that's just probably not that interesting. But today I want to talk about some of the camera gear that we use, specifically that I use. I am the guy that's usually filming a lot of the hunts. Sometimes we have to self-film, but anytime there's a chance that I can film for somebody, we definitely take advantage of it, and I love to film, and so I want to talk about a couple lenses today. I'm going to talk about the Tamron 28-200. This is the lens that I used last year. Great lens, loved a lot of things about it. And then I'm going to talk about the Sony 24-240. So I'm switching to the 24-240 this year. I'm going to talk about why I'm switching to it, but I'm going to talk about the things I liked about the Tamron and the things that I like about the 24-240 Sony. So let's dive in. First thing I want to say is I am shooting on a Sony FX3, which is a full frame sensor camera. So finding a great all-in-one lens for a full frame sensor camera is a lot more difficult than finding a great all-in-one lens for a crop sensor camera, which is what the majority of people are going to be using. There's huge advantages to having a full frame sensor camera, but they do cost a lot more money, and the lenses are more expensive, and sometimes you just don't have the diversity that you can get with the crop sensor camera. Part of the reason I like using a full frame sensor camera is because the low light capabilities are just incredibly better, and overall image is just going to be a lot better quality. So if you're using a crop sensor camera, this is not going to be the best review for you because these two lenses are specifically for full frame sensor. We will do another review on some crop sensor cameras. We've got a couple guys that use them, and they're great cameras. The lens availability for those is so much better for just all around diverse lens. So we'll have some of those coming up in the future. All right, so the Tamron 28-200 is just an absolute awesome lens. It has a great picture. It's lightweight. The zoom on it is pretty good, going from 28-200. One of the drawbacks to this lens is no optical steady shot, so there's no optical stabilization in the lens. So if you're running a camera that doesn't have IBIS, it's gonna be a little bit tougher to keep it steady, especially if you're holding it. If you're on like a good camera arm or on a tripod, you're gonna be fine. But when you're having to do any hand holding or just any sort of shots that you're trying to move a lot more, not having that optical steady shot is definitely a big drawback. One feature that's really nice on this lens is there's a lock switch, so when it's in your bag it can't turn, which is a cool feature. I never really had too many issues with needing that, but a lot of people I know I've said that they have. The 28-200 goes from f2.8 to f5.6, so it has a little bit better low light capability and a little bit better depth of field, which gives you a little bit more cinematic look, which is super awesome. Going from 28-200, you get a nice good wide angle, and then you get that reach all the way out to 200, which is super nice. A lot of lenses, especially if you get into your high dollar lenses like your G Master lenses on the Sony, you really can't get like that type of range. So generally you're gonna be like 24-105 or 24-70, or you're going to like a 70-200, so then you don't have that wide angle. So that's one of the benefits of having that 28-200 range. I never really had a lot of issue with getting the wide angle like in the tree stand. There was a couple times where I felt like it'd been nice to have a little bit wider angle on it. And so that was one of the reasons I decided to try out the Sony 24-240. My biggest complaint about this lens is probably the fact that it went to 200, which is great, but a lot of times, you really just want that extra reach. And so being able to get that extra 40 millimeters out of the Sony really is huge. And then being able to use the clear image zoom that Sony has available, so then you can crop in further. So I can get over 300 millimeters basically on my zoom, which is just a huge bonus, especially if you're, if you're hunting out in the wide open, like where a lot of us hunt. We don't hunt in like thick woods where everything's coming right up close. Like a lot of times we see stuff coming from farther away, and so we want to be able to get those shots when they're still farther away from us, and not having that extra zoom just really kind of set us back a little bit, I felt at times. So that was part of the reason that I switched. Really good lens overall, nothing wrong with it, and it's a great budget-friendly lens. I think I only paid like $550 for it, and for a full frame sensor camera, to get a good lens like that with such a great image, it's really hard to beat. So if you're looking for something entry level to get in cheap with a full frame camera and still look really good, the Tamron 20-200 is definitely going to be a great lens for that. All right, next let's go over the Sony 24-240. So the f-stop on the 24-240 is 3.5 to 6.3. So you don't have quite as good of a low light capability. It's not a huge difference, and depending on the camera you're running, you won't even notice it at all. But you won't get quite as much of that shallow depth of field, which gives that a little bit more, you know, cinematic, like really pretty look. But the reach getting to 240 is just super nice, and honestly getting to 24 millimeters over 28 on the Tamron is just so nice. You really wouldn't think that it would make that much of a difference, but the fact that you get that extra 4 millimeters makes it so much wider for close shots, and it's just such a huge advantage. One disadvantage of this lens to the Tamron is this one is pretty significantly heavier, I would say, and it's a little bit wider and bulkier, but for the most part it's not something that you really notice. And the biggest advantage that this lens has is it has optical steady shot in the lens, which is just so nice to have. If you're doing any hand shooting, it's just so much steadier and you don't have to worry about the shakes as much. It just makes it a lot easier to use, a lot more user friendly. The image on it seems really good. You don't get quite as good of a shallow depth of field as that Tamron, but it's still really good. And for just an all-in-one lens, whether you're in a tree stand or a box blind or you're just on the ground right behind the guy, being able to go from 24 to 240 is just such a huge advantage. It's so nice. I really enjoy this lens so far. I haven't really gotten to do any hunting with it yet, but from everything I've used it for so far, it is just a great overall lens with a great image. As you can see here, I've got both the lenses zoomed all the way out, and there's not a whole lot of difference in length. They're pretty much similar. Like I said, the only difference is the Sony seems to be a little heavier, but it's not bad. Depending on what camera you're running, you know, if you're running a super heavy camera, then every ounce counts, but I don't have an issue with the extra weight at all and the extra size on it. Since I haven't been out on any hunts with the Sony yet, I took some test shots with the Tamron and the Sony at different focal lengths, so that way you guys can see kind of the difference of the wide angle and how far it zooms, so that way you can compare the two, and you'll see the image looks really good in both of them. You probably won't be able to really tell a difference, and I just wanted to be able to show like that little bit of extra wide, how nice that is, and then that little bit of extra reach and how much of a difference that really makes. So here's those test shots. So this lens that's on the camera now is the Tamron 28-200, and I am literally about arm's reach. Like my hand is about 2 to 3 inches from the camera, and this is at 28 millimeters, so this is the widest focal length that it gets. Just want to give you guys an example of if you guys were in a blind or a stand, what you're looking at as far as that wide range compared to the 24-240. So now I've got the Sony 24-240 on the camera, haven't moved it at all. Again, same thing. It's about 2 to 3 inches away from the lens. It's in the same exact spot. This is what it looks like at 24 millimeters compared to 28 millimeters. So you can see that big difference of just those 4 millimeters making it that much wider, how much of a big difference it can make. If I had this camera, I mean, if I was in the tree stand and I was right here, now I'm about, you know, 1.5 feet away from the camera. And as you can see, it's still super wide and still makes me look a lot farther away. That's one of the huge advantages that I really like of the 24 millimeter over the 28 millimeter. So for this entire video, I've actually been shooting on the Tamron 17-28. That's the wide angle lens I use. There's some other ones that go a little bit wider, which would be nice, but the 17 it seems to be more than wide enough for me for a wide angle shot. I haven't moved the camera at all from when I tested the 28 millimeter and 24 millimeter. So right here, but I actually have this lens at 24 millimeters right now. So it's basically the same exact thing as the Sony 24-240 at its widest angle. But if I go to 17, Now you can see how much wider it actually is. It's just that huge wide, I mean, I'm only probably 2.5 feet from the camera. You can see the big difference of having a good wide angle lens, which is super nice for getting some, you know, those nice, beautiful time lapses of the sky and everything. So it's a big difference, but it's really good to have a good wide angle lens and a good zoom lens. And so that's why I run the Tamron 17-28, which is a great lens, especially for the price point. It's a really good quality lens, give you a really nice, good wide angle. And then now I'll be running the Sony 24-240 for my all around in one lens. So one huge plus, like I mentioned earlier, is budget friendly. The Tamron 28-200 is $749 brand new, where the Sony brand new 24-240 is $1,049. Now I bought both these lenses actually used. You can get really good deals on used lenses that are in perfect mint condition on eBay or any of the sites online that sell used equipment. I think I ended up getting both of mine off of eBay, and they were both in perfect condition, perfect clear glass. And I paid for the Tamron, I believe I paid around $550, and for the Sony, I think I paid close to $600. So really buying them used wasn't a huge difference. So if you have the ability to, I personally would go with the 24-240, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with the Tamron 28-200. It is a great lens, and if you can get a really good deal on that, get it cheaper. I've seen them go for, you know, $500. Great lens to get started with. Well, hopefully those test shots helped you in maybe making a decision on which lens you want to go with. Again, the 28-200 Tamron's an awesome lens. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. Great budget-friendly lens. But for me, the 24-240 is what I'm going to be running this year. And that's mainly just because it has the optical steady shot and having that extra little bit of wide, and then having that 40 millimeters of extra reach is just such a huge difference for having that great all-around one lens that you don't have to take off your camera at all while you're in the stand. And that's just a huge feature to me. I don't want to have to put on my wide angle lens and then switch it out, because you never know if you put that lens on for an interview and then all of a sudden you have a deer come in and now you can't get that extra reach. So having that great all-around one lens for a full-frame sensor camera is just such a huge benefit. And the Sony 24-240 is that lens for me. Hopefully this helps you guys on your search for what lens you're trying to run on your full-frame sensor camera. 28-200 Tamron's a great lens. The Sony 24-240 is just a little bit better to me, and so that's what I'm going to run this year. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Hit the like button and subscribe if you guys want to follow along for this next following season. We'll try and put out all the best content we can that's not going to bore you to death and that you guys are going to enjoy, because we don't want to watch boring videos either. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.